Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Nazrin Abd Aziz. I am a senior lecturer at Faculty of Science and I'm also a research fellow at Innovation Center in Agri-Technology for Advanced Bioprocessing here at UTM. GMO. I'm sure many of you have heard this word before. Some of you may know about it in a very much great details, that you have a very strong opinion about it. But some of you may not know so much about it. You will be like, what's the fuss all about it? So what is a GMO? So GMO stands for genetically modified organism. So it is an organism in which its genetic material has been modified. So if you used to remember in school, we learned that living things like us, humans, are consist of several organs, and within each of that organs, there are several types of tissue. And within each of that tissue, there are millions of cells. And within each of that cells, there are genetic material, or what we call as a DNA. So this DNA contains the instructions on how to produce our nose, on how to produce our hairs, how to produce our fingers and our toes. So it's really, the genetic material DNA is like a blueprint of life. I can make an analogy of this genetic material DNA like a recipe book, a cooking instructions. For example, over here we have the recipe book to 1001 types of our mama's roti. Let's say at 2 a.m. in the morning, you go to the mama and you don't feel like eating one of the rotis. You had enough. You already eat all the roti kosong, roti planta, roti milo, roti tissue, roti, all kinds of roti. You have already tasted all 1001 types already. And you are in the mood of something else. Let's say, for example, you are in the mood of foie gras. Or maybe you want to eat a beluga caviar at our Mama El Safa. For UTM students, you might know this, right? But then of course, most probably, our mama wouldn't know how to prepare this meal, right? So what can we do? We can insert a recipe on how to prepare a foie gras into this recipe book, and we can also include a recipe how to cook a beluga caviar into this recipe book. Now, we call this recipe book as the modified version of recipe book. So similarly, in genetic modifications, we can add genetic material or DNA from another organism into another organism. So the recipients of the organisms now we call has been genetically modified. Okay, so in this case, I'm using an existing recipe. In genetic modification, there is another way where you can also create your own genetic materials. For example, you are in the mood of a crispy rendang. Okay, so of course this recipe does not exist anywhere in the world, but you are in the mood of a crispy rendang, so you can create your own recipe on how to prepare crispy rendang. You can add it into this modified recipe book, and you can order a crispy rendang at our mama at 3 a.m. in the morning, for no problem at all. So this is the idea of genetic modification. So I usually ask these questions to my students in Introduction to Biotechnology and Genetic Engineering class, and this is a special opportunity for me to ask the same questions to an audience with a very diverse background. Would you eat a GMO product? Raise your hands if you don't have any problems with it. Okay, I see one hand. I think you are from biotechnology background. Okay, some of the boys in the back. Okay, not many. Okay, so it is understandable. All right. The next questions would be, would you allow GMO plants to be grown in Malaysia? Raise your hands. Okay, one. Okay, some of you. Okay, all right. So most of you reject the idea of GMO and even planting a GMO in Malaysia. This is understandable, okay? So if we look at a global perspective, okay, back in 2019, there is an estimated 2.7 billion hectares of land that are being planted already with genetically modified crops, okay? So if you look at a much closer perspective, our Southeast Asia regions, some of the countries actually have been planting genetically modified crops, okay? So for example, our closest neighbor, Indonesia, all the way back in 2019, they have been planting sugarcane that has been genetically modified. In what way this sugarcane has been modified? So they are now 30% more sweeter. than the normal sugarcane, and they are also drought resistant, meaning if there is a problem with our climate, it is already happening right now. Some regions are receiving more rainfall, some regions are receiving less rainfall. So in the case if Indonesia receive less rainfall, this sugarcane can still continue to grow healthily compared to the normal sugarcane. So that is the type of sugarcane that has been genetically modified in Indonesia. How about in Philippines? So in Philippines, they are planting golden rice. So on the left side, so this is the normal white rice that we consume on a daily basis. On the right side, so this is the golden rice. So it is golden in color because it has been modified to contain a higher concentrations of beta-carotene. So what does beta-carotenes do? When we eat beta-carotenes, so by the way, this is a natural plant pigments that also give carrots this orange color. Okay, so this is the same plant pigment. So when we eat beta-carotenes, it will be converted into vitamin A in our body. So why do scientists want to create a genetically modified rice with a higher concentrations of beta-carotene? Because worldwide, unfortunately, between 250,000 to 500,000 of children every year became blind due to vitamin A deficiency. And half of them would die within 12 months. So when scientists created this golden rice, the idea would be, because most of these children live in poor and developing countries, they don't have access to nutritious vegetables and meat products, but at least they have access to basic rice. So if we could modify this rice to contain a higher concentrations of beta-carotene that can be converted into vitamin A, so hopefully we can prevent the number of unnecessary death due to vitamin A deficiency. So that is in Philippines. But what about Malaysia? So if you look at this diagram, it is empty. But I can say that this diagram is incorrect. We do actually have a GM plants being planted in Malaysia. So you might think, do we have a GM rice or GM oil palm, or is it GM chili, GM cabbage, or whatever chili, or whatever types of crops? Not exactly. Actually in Malaysia, we have genetically modified rubber trees. Okay, so genetically modified rubber trees. And how do I know this? This is, by the way, not a top secret government research project. This is actually a publicly available information that you can access on your own smartphone as a Malaysian, or even as an international student. You can access this information. How can you do that? If you type Jabatan Biokeselamatan in Google, you might, if some of you want to try it right now, you can go into this biosafety.gov.my. So this is actually a public government agency. I have no personal interest in this website. So this is a freely and available and accessible website. So if you go to this biosafety.gov.my, it will bring up to this homepage. So you want to click on Perkhidmatan, which will bring down a drop-down menu. So next, you want to click on Keputusan LBK. Okay, so this will bring you to a page with 3 options. So you want to click on the first one, Uji Kaji Lapangan, or in English, Field Trial Results. So if you click on this, it will give out the information on all field trials of genetically modified organism that has been approved in Malaysia. So we can see from here, there are actually 4 types of genetically modified organism that has been done in Malaysia. So the first one is genetically modified mosquito. Yes, mosquito genetically modified has been released in Malaysia all the way back in 2010. But I'm not going to focus on this. I'm going to need a long, dedicated topic to discuss about genetically modified insects. Number 2 and number 4, genetically modified papaya. But also, I wouldn't really call this as a field trial because they are still grown in a greenhouse. So they are still within a containment facility. Number 3 is what I'm going to talk about, is what I'm going to be focusing on, because these are the genetically modified rubber trees that are being planted out in the open. Still within a controlled field trial, but they are out in the environment. So we can see that they have been granted permission in 2019, And I can actually gain more information about this project. As I said, this is a freely available information. So if I click on Laporan Penilaian Risiko or Risk Assessment Report, I can gain access, you can gain access to the same document, to the point that we can even know where are actually these plants are being planted. So over here is status. This field trial is a 12 hectares land in Penawa, Kota Tinggi. Just 1 hour away from here, you can find the only genetically modified rubber trees in Malaysia. So in what way does these rubber trees have been modified? At first, when I heard about genetically modified rubber trees in Malaysia, I thought that it has been modified to produce more rubber. Okay, but apparently not. It has been modified so that it can produce human proteins. Not one, but 3 types of human proteins. So the first one is an antibody for Streptococcus gordoni. So Streptococcus gordoni is a bacteria in your mouth that is the causal agent of dental plaque and cavity. The second human protein is a human hormone that we can use during open heart surgery because they can lower cardiac blood pressure. And the third one is a human blood clotting inducer that we use during cardiovascular surgery. So these are all important pharmaceutical proteins that we use in medical perspective. So the idea would be to have all of these human proteins to be produced in the latex of the rubber trees. So imagine a future, a rubber tappers, the next time, our Malaysian rubber tappers, when they are tapping the rubber trees, they are not going to sell their rubbers to make a low value product like bicycle tires or latex glue. No, they will be selling their rubber to extract a high value pharmaceutical proteins like antibody, vaccines, or even important human enzymes. I don't know about you, but for me, as a son of a rubber tappers, growing up looking at my parents breaking their back tapping rubber trees from morning until evening, it means a lot to me. Because for me, it means that there is a future in Malaysia where rubber tappers like my parents and rubber tappers like many others around Malaysia can make so much more from what they are doing by selling rubber that contain a higher value pharmaceutical products. So the act of producing pharmaceutical proteins in genetically modified plants is what we call as a biofarming. So this is a play of words between biology, pharmaceutical and farming. So the idea over here, we are farming genetically modified plants, not for the productions of food, not to be eaten, but we are using them as a mini factory to produce important pharmaceutical proteins. Okay, so my own experience for my PhD project, I genetically modified these plants, okay, scientifically known as Mucuna bracteata. You may have actually seen these plants when you are traveling along the oil palm plantations. You may have actually seen these plants. So this is a Mucuna bracteata. So our oil palm companies use them as a cover crop to reduce soil erosions in the plantations. So I genetically modified these plants to produce a human antibody for toxoplasmosis. And thank God I was successful, and that's how I got my PhD. So toxoplasmosis is a parasitic infection that is caused and spread through cat species and uncooked meat. And very early in this month, okay, my PhD colleague at University Malaya has reported success in producing the same antibody for toxoplasmosis, but using a different plant, using a different system. And that system is a detached banana leaves. So very interestingly, so in Malay proverb we have a saying that banana trees only fruits once. Pokok pisang tidak berbuah 2 kali, right? So over here, what happens after our banana farmers have harvested their banana fruits? They will chop down the trees and they will just let the banana stems and the banana leaves to rot in the field, right? So over here, we might have a future where our banana farmers can make a high income, first by selling their banana fruits, and second by selling their banana leaves to the pharmaceutical companies so that they can use this to produce a high value pharmaceutical products. Let it be enzymes, let it be antibody, let it be vaccines. So we are adding value to banana farming industry. So that's one of the future that we might have. So previously, whenever I talk to people that I am working with GM plants, I genetically modified plants. So some of the first go-to response that I got was, oh no, that's a big no for me. I'm not going to eat a GM plants. And I always have to clarify, no, I'm not making GM plants to be eaten. I'm not making GM plants for consumption. I am using a GM plants as a mini factory to produce important pharmaceutical proteins. So what I'm trying to highlight over here, that genetic modifications in plants especially is a very broad technology that requires us to have a wider perspective, to be more open in embracing this technology. And also one thing that I hope has been delivered through my talk is that GM research in our country is a well-regulated process. It is a controlled process, and the evaluation process is transparent. Anyone, you can gain this information through the government's website, biosafety.gov.my. And you may want to explore a little bit more in this website, because within that website, the same page that I showed you earlier also contains information on GM materials that has been imported into Malaysia and GM materials product that are being sold in Malaysia. Alright, so try to go around in this website and you will find interesting things. Hopefully, with a more informed and more knowledge about what kind of GM products that we have in Malaysia, you can make a better informed decisions about genetic modification technology. So before I leave my stage, just my final questions. Now that you have learned about how we can use a genetic modified plants, would you now allow planting of GM plants in Malaysia for the productions of pharmaceutical proteins? Raise your hands. Okay, I raise my case. Thank you very much.